Happy Tuesday. We are delighted to have you with us this morning, and we are back in Philippians chapter 1. If you remember from last week, I was going to walk you through the book of Philippians and share some of the insights that the Apostle Paul gave to the church at Philippi. And as a reminder, he's in prison for preaching the gospel. And it's an interesting thought because of what he shares here in verses 12 through 18, Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 through 18. Let me share that with you. But I want you to know, brethren, the things which have happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel, so that it has become evident to the whole palace guard and to all the rest that my chains are in Christ. Verse 14, and most of the brethren in the Lord, having become confident by my chains, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Some indeed preach Christ even from envy and strife, and some also from goodwill. The former preach Christ from selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my chains. But the latter out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and in this I rejoice, yes, and will rejoice. I don't know if you're understanding the context right off here, but Paul's in prison because he was preaching the gospel, and now he's in prison preaching the gospel. And the commitment level that he had to being obedient to Christ and the Great Commission is phenomenal. But what else is happening? There are other believers in prison, and they are being encouraged because Paul is in prison preaching the gospel. And so he said, they are confident by my chains. Their faith is being strengthened because Paul is being obedient. But then notice this other group that's there. There's other people in prison, presumably Christians, but maybe not, but they're preaching Christ out of selfish ambition, verse 16, not sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my chains. And so there's people actually preaching the gospel in prison, hoping that they're going to persecute Paul more for his faith and obedience. What a crazy situation. And so we don't really know genuinely if they were followers of Christ and just didn't approve of Paul, or if they were people pretending to be Christians, hoping that the sharing the message of Christ would persecute him more. But what was in the end? Paul said, I don't really care what their motive is. Christ is being preached. And so let's come back and make this personal for just a moment here. What does it take for you and I to speak up or to shut up? See, the Great Commission, Matthew 28, tells us to go into all the world and preach the gospel. Colossians chapter 1, verse 28, which is our theme at Orchard, proclaiming Christ, changing the world. Colossians 1:28 says, him we preach, and we are doing so that other people's lives would be changed. And so Paul is being faithful, and that's why he's in prison, but even despite his chains, he's being faithful. And so are we actively pursuing the message of Christ with other people? Let's just face it. At times it's nerve-wracking, it's awkward, it's difficult to get the conversation started. But we must be consistently looking for opportunities to share our faith, to squeeze the gospel in, to make the message of Christ known. And then we must be willing to continue that despite sometimes the obstacles or persecution that we get. And we know we're not to be rude, we are not to be obnoxious, we are not to be offensive. But at times, the message of Christ is offensive. People take objection to the truth. And so on this Tuesday, put yourself in Paul's shoes. Put yourself in his cell. Would you continue to be faithful? Would we be faithful to the gospel message? And hopefully in the very end, our heart attitude would be like Paul says in verse number 18, What then? Only in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and in this I rejoice. Have a great day.